Hello to everybody, in fact. So I'm here to talk to you about SoftwareIDM's Identity Panel. And in particular, I've talked about Identity Panel before, but I'm going to try and focus on how it can ease the way for the sorts of questions that come up with compliance requirements and audit requirements. I don't like starting with apologies, but I'm going to apologize for a little bit of hyperbole on one of the emails we sent out. I don't think this is a miracle tool, but I do think it's pretty good. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about. If I can get the next slide. I can't assume that any of you have seen Identity Panel before, so I'm going to take you through as quickly as I can what it does, its primary features, what it's for, what it connects to, and probably what I'll then do is go into demo and then review the features that I've shown you afterwards. When I do the demo, I'm going to obviously show you what it looks like, show you the interface and the user experience. But I'm also going to show you some of the administrative configuration stuff because I think it's relevant to understanding what's going on and how this can be useful. So there'll be a certain amount of jumping between straightforward, well, here's what it looks like, and here's what the output is, and a little bit of the under the hood stuff. I'm going to try and keep the focus on how it can help with audit and compliance issues. So first of all, what is it? It is, if you like the term, a single pane of glass for managing, monitoring, reporting on your cloud and on-premises identity. So we have this identity information, users and groups, and actually any other objects that we might be interested in, but we're usually thinking of users, and we're often thinking of groups and group memberships. We have this information typically in lots of different places, lots of different silos. Now, we may have some kind of synchronization going on, which aligns these. And when we're dealing with Identity Panel, when we're thinking of Microsoft software, which at Oxford Computer Group we do a lot, we often are thinking of Microsoft Identity Manager or Forefront Identity Manager, FIM or MIM as they're called, almost the same product, MIM being the latest version. And we are often synchronizing data across our silos. So we're taking data out of HR, synchronizing it with Active Directory, maybe with another line of business applications, possibly up into the cloud. And so that's interesting. And it is interesting to see what that data looks like for perhaps a particular user or a group or whatever across all of those silos, and to see that it is in fact synchronizing, or maybe that it's not synchronizing and it looks different. So it's there to monitor and to report on that stuff. It also has quite a lot of management built into it, so I'll try and show you. In particular, it maintains a continuous history of the state of all of these identity objects in all of those silos. And that's pretty neat because, generally speaking, all of these silos will have a retention policy of some kind, which is restricted typically by the technology, the size of the database, and so on. It's quite normal in Microsoft Identity Manager for it to be a matter of 30 days or something. It'll be different in different systems. It's information in Azure Active Directory isn't kept for very long and so on. But this gives you a continuous history, so we can go back to any point in time and look at the state of an object, as long, of course, as we have been gathering the information, and that's one of the things we talk about. And only maintain the history to the extent that it's been given the data. This allows you then to keep a retention policy that suits your business and your requirements, that's consistent across all of these silos. You've then got a forensic reporting capability. What was the value of this attribute? And that could be anything from somebody's display name to something perhaps a little bit more important, like their job title or department, which may well be used for generating permissions, entitlements of various kinds. And so we can end up with who had access to what, and perhaps even who approved it. So, what kind of systems can we connect to? Well, not surprisingly, things that relate very closely to Microsoft Identity Manager, because Identity Panel grew out of, perhaps we might even say, some shortcomings of Microsoft Identity Manager. In other words, it adds to Microsoft Identity Manager, but it's grown beyond that. And actually, Microsoft Identity Manager doesn't have to be there at all. You could perfectly well be reporting on AD, Azure AD, O365 if you like, perhaps ADFS, perhaps an HR system, and MIM might not be there at all. But it does work well with MIM. And a particular advantage of working with MIM is if MIM is connected to lots of different things, we immediately get the data, the identity data from all of those systems without having to independently connect to them. It also works with Azure AD Connect. Azure AD Connect is a sort of special version of MIM, which is free and lots of people use to connect their on-premises Active Directory to their Azure Active Directory. And so it can not only monitor each end of that, but it can monitor what's going on in the middle as well, how it gets synchronized. In fact, it can be used to entirely manage the whole FIM, MIM, Azure AD Connect activity, controlling it, deciding when runs take place, when synchronization takes place, optimizing, I'll show you a little bit of that, monitoring the health, raising alerts and so on when strange stuff happens. I don't know how quickly this is updating on your screen, but let's hope that you've now got a picture of a very simple architecture. It's a very typical sort of setup, and it's more or less what I've got. Not quite, I've cheated a little in my environment because I didn't want to have too many servers and too many things going on. But broadly speaking, I've got an HR system and I've got MIM synchronizing it. As I say, MIM doesn't have to be anywhere in the picture, but it kind of helps if it is, because MIM already has its finger in a number of pies. It knows what's going on in the HR system. It is perhaps writing out to maybe some sort of ERM system, SAP or something, to various line of business systems, Active Directory, of course, maybe other directories, which in turn might be being synchronized by Azure AD into the cloud. So we've got this identity information sitting in all of these places. And then sitting at the top there is Identity Panel, gathering information, gathering the data so that it can keep the data history, but also being used to schedule and monitor. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Schedule and monitor the health of some of these systems. And the immediate features that we'll see when we go into demo in a moment is we'll get a dashboard with essential information straight away. We'll be able to report, and we can define workflows and so on. We also get the time traveler, which is the way that we view the identity data across lots of systems. And the other thing just to mention is that security, although I'm not going to go into it at all, security can be controlled on a fine-grained basis according to user role. And generally speaking, perhaps not many people are going to have access to this system, but to the extent that a number of them do, you can control who can see what, who can report on what, down to individual attribute level in each silo. Now, the next slide is about features, but I'm going to come back to that when I've shown you what it looks like. With a bit of luck now, you can see my virtual machine. I'm sure one of my colleagues will shout if that hasn't happened. So I'm slightly worried about the resolution here. It might be worth me just trying to make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so like all sort of back office systems, what you see isn't necessarily, you know, the best looking thing at all times. It's functional. I actually think it does look quite pretty, but there's a lot of data here crammed into a web page for our dashboard. You can set up any number of dashboards, and different people can have different dashboards, and all manner of things can be included. I can't possibly go into all of this, but you'll see straight away that we've got some information at the top left about a run history. In other words, what's been going on? What have we been scanning? What have we been examining and pulling data from? Right at the bottom, you'll see that there are some health panels. And we can see straight away that there are some exclamation marks there, and there are some issues. I've deliberately left it like that just so that you can see that they're not always green ticks. And a lot of this stuff is pretty much out of the box. Loads and loads of health checks that are available to you to put on this dashboard. Plus, you can configure your own. You can write your own. You can also include charts of activity. So I've got a chart of activity there for password reset. Not a lot going on. It doesn't look like I've done a password reset since last September, which in my demo machine is perhaps not surprising. But in general, it might be interesting to be able to monitor that kind of thing. These are password resets, by the way, going through MIM as it happens. So we get a dashboard, so we get an immediate picture of health checks, activity that's going on, recent activity, and I can also run a schedule from here, but I'm not going to cover that just yet. I'm going to jump straight into the idea of searching for a particular identity and being able to view that, review that data across lots of silos. I'm going to search for somebody called Amy. Now, it just so happens that I've only got one person called Amy, but it's actually going to, that search is going to search all attributes everywhere across all silos for any attribute that's Amy. As it happens, I say, we've only got one. That's perhaps not how you would normally search for a user. You could search by something unique, like an employee ID or something like that. And what you'll see depends on exactly how it's going to be, how it's configured. I'm just making a few quick changes here to just show you a particular view that I want to show you. So what we're looking at is the current state of this person called Amy Rusco. And on the left, I've got the HR silo. Now, the reason that I've put the HR silo on the left and configured it this way is because HR is our source of truth. And so as we go from left to right, we're taking the authoritative data, and we should expect to see that it's been propagated through to all these other systems. Now, how did it get propagated through to these other systems? To Active Directory, to Office 365, and so on, to an LDAP system, to could be to SAP, all sorts of things. How's it getting there? Well, it could be manual. I mean, we would hope not, because you really wouldn't expect to see everything all up to date and aligned. As it happens, we've got Microsoft Identity Manager in place, but we might have some other synchronization system in place. The fact is that it's been synchronized. The thing there called the metaverse is, if you like, MIM itself. It's MIM's view of this person. But other than that, it's telling you what it thinks Active Directory looks like, what it thinks Office 365 looks like, and so on. And as I mouse over values, it'll show up the corresponding values in other systems. And I can also invoke something which SoftwareIDM called Contrails. And this actually shows us how a piece of data like Amy's first name gets propagated to other places, gets used for a display name, or perhaps it might be used in an account name or something like that. Or we could go to something like, there is a status here, active. If I highlight that, we can see how that propagates to other places, including to user account control, where it ensures that we have a normal account. If it said inactive, it might say a disabled account. Not much time to show you all the things that we can do here, so I'm going to switch that off. So first of all, I just wanted you to get the idea that we can view all the identity information for this person across lots of silos. Now, I'm now going to jump into an administrative thing here and just say, well, how did that happen? How did we end up able to do that? When you configure Identity Panel, you configure a list of providers. Providers, if you like, are a little bit like connectors in the general world. And we've got a connector here for MIM, top one. We've got a few oddly named ones. We've got one for AD, so where we're actually pulling data directly from Active Directory. We've got one for Azure, where we're pulling information directly from Azure AD, or Office 365, if you like. And if I were to look at one of these, I would find quite simply that we've configured it in some way. We've had to provide credentials to be able to get at the data, and we've had to say what data we wish to monitor. In this case, users and groups. And if I were to look at another one, I'd see much the same thing. So the idea is that we have a number of different providers, and if you look at the providers that are available, you'll see that there are quite a few providers which cover most circumstances. So you can connect to SQL, you can connect to different sorts of LDAP directories, and so on. And I'm not going to add any more, but we could add further ones. Another thing just to quickly show you here is that having connected to lots of different providers of data, there has to be some way that you tie them together. How do we know who Amy is in MIM compared to Amy in Office 365? And so there's a set of join rules. Now I've done the join rules in rather a crude way, and really because I've been a bit lazy, to be honest. If you see, what I've done is I've arranged a way that we can find the groups from MIM and I've just dragged that one up as well, and then we can more easily, it doesn't want to go. There, we more easily see it. So you'll see that we've got 3 references to group here. We've got MIM, the MIM portal. Again, if you don't know what that means, it doesn't really matter. And then we've got Azure, MS Online. So we've got a way of connecting Office 365 to the others. I've done it in, as I say, rather a crude way. I've just used display name. I've used display name there, and I've used display name there. Now, in a real situation, you wouldn't use display name. It's convenient for me when I'm demoing. I know that all the display names are unique as it happens, and it's very easy for me to debug and see what's going on. Of course, in reality, you'd have to use something that's absolutely reliable. You could use an employee ID. You could use some kind of GUID if you know that it's flowed from one to the other. I'm just trying to show you that there is a simple way in which you set up join rules. And that means that when you look at Amy, let's go back to Amy, and you look at Amy in one of our systems like HR, it's able to find the same Amy right across, and I'll just adjust this a little bit because I'll just show you something slightly different. Okay, and what you're seeing is data across the systems that it's able to find the data in, including, for example, Office 365. Okay, so far so good. Let's now look at the historical side of this. So I'm going to choose somebody that I've been a bit busy with doing different things too. I'm going to find this guy called Cyril. And what happened earlier is I made a number of changes to Cyril, and so what we'll find is we can go anywhere in time and see what he looked like. So if I click this drop down, we'll see that there's a now, and there are a number of different dates when things happened to Cyril. So if I go back to earlier today, this was at just a few hours ago, and again, I'm not going to explain everything that I'm doing, but just a few hours ago, I changed something. Here he was before I changed him, and here, if I go forward, we can see the department has changed. Blue there, let's get out of the way, that blue means something changed, it's a modification. So department changed to IT from what it was before. And at this moment, if we look in Active Directories, department still research and development. In other words, we can look at this in quite a fine-grained way and go forward even a few seconds at a time, seeing the IT attribute flow through to all the other silos. And this is what you're seeing. You're seeing the changes going through to each silo, jumping about a bit because I haven't necessarily got them in the right order. And then I've changed his job to IT director. Perhaps you can see that now on the left, and that's going to propagate through, and so on. Now, these attributes, of course, might be being used to generate group memberships or to decide on roles in systems and so on. So these can be quite important, and it can be quite important to be able to see the state that someone was in at any time. I'm going to go forward a little bit further and show his status just going from active to inactive there on the left. The result of that is quite dramatic because he gets deprovisioned completely from the LDAP system. Don't know whether you could see that. And other changes go on, description in a different system perhaps. And then after a while, I reactivated him, and you'll see he gets re-provisioned into LDAP. And that green means something new. That means that a new account has been created, new attributes being populated, hasn't quite finished yet. And it will actually finish. There you are, there are the rest of the attributes flowing through and so on. Eventually, if we go forward far enough, we'll get back to the now state with everything settled down, and we can see Cyril in the state he's in. So we're in a situation where, using this drop down or using these arrows, we can actually go to any point in time where something happened to this person. There's no point in recording times that nothing happened. And we can say, what was the state at that time? And that will be the same state until the next change that happens. So we have a straightforward way of being able to see the state of an object at any time. And that can apply not only to a user like Cyril, but to a group. So I've got a group here called confidential. And it's found this group, and I'm going to find that group in one of the silos. It happens to be the MIM portal. Now, why the MIM portal? Because the MIM portal is where the changes take place. It's where we actually control groups in my particular setup. It could be a different system. And the changes that happened are propagated through to Active Directory. So if I look at the now state, what I find is that there are a number of members, 7 as it happens, and not surprisingly, I find the same 7 members over here in Active Directory on the right. So it's been controlled from the portal, and the output is over here on the right. And if I click the drop down again, I'm going to see all the times when something changed. So I did quite a lot of messing about with this. I could go back to this point a few hours ago and see, and actually you can see something going on here. Anything that's green is new, anything that's red is being deleted. So what we're seeing here is a swap to the ownership of this group, but also at the same time, new members coming in and old members going out. So all of that happened at that moment. If I go forward in time, and what I'm doing is clicking the right arrow here and just moving forward, sometimes just a few seconds, sometimes minutes, sometimes days, you'll see these changes propagating through. Another change there coming through, and we're seeing sometimes the change is happening in one silo while another change still hasn't happened in another silo. But as you keep going forward, eventually everything lines up and settles down. Now I've got a new change, I've got some more people coming in, and those will be propagated through, and we'll see those arrive. And there they are, showing up in green in Active Directory. Now I apologize if this is happening a little bit quickly for the way that the web updates this for you, but hopefully you're getting the idea that we can go to any point in time also for one of our groups. And it doesn't have to be restricted to groups. Any kind of object, any group-like object or user-like object that we can pull out of one of these systems, we can keep track of their attributes for as long as we want to. Let's now look at how that data is gathered. Keep an eye on the time here. Let's look at how this data is gathered. We can only expect Identity Panel to be able to gather the data if it's in control of what's going on. Well, we have to find some way of getting the data in. So 2 ways of doing it. One is that every time a change happens in a system, we could make a call to Identity Panel and say, okay, scan this system to see what's changed. Or after a number of changes, we could do it. Or we can do this. We can set up a schedule, and that schedule can do the activity automatically. So I've got a regular, what I'm calling my regular schedule here. You'll see it's scheduled to run, sorry about this. That was unexpected. You'll see that we've got a schedule that runs every week and every day of every week, and that it starts at 15 minutes past midnight. It starts at 15 minutes after midnight, runs every 15 minutes until the end of the day. Now, it's not actually enabled. I've deliberately not enabled it because I don't really want it to run every 15 minutes. I'm just showing you that it could. I run it manually for the purpose of demonstration. And what it does is all of these steps here. Sorry, that's rushing about a bit. What it does is run all of these steps. And in the case of MIM, if you know it, this is no surprise. There is no built-in way in MIM of running a schedule. And it's normal to use a script or something to do it. So Identity Panel is providing a very specific facility here, which is to tell MIM to go and import from that system, export to that system, and so on. But as I say, MIM doesn't even have to be in this. We can also, on this regular basis, scan for passwords. We can scan Azure. We can scan any of the systems that we're associated with. So every 15 minutes, it runs through this entire list. But let's just go a little bit further into it. You can optimize the way it behaves, and you can also check for errors. So if I look at this one here, this is a full import from the HR system. And there's something here which says, if the counters are all 0, then skip the next step. This is a simple optimization idea, which just says, hey, if you didn't even import anything, there's no need to do the next thing. If I go down a little bit further to this one here, this one is saying, if this condition is true, go right ahead and do the next thing. What is the next thing? It's an export. But if that condition's not true, don't do it. This gives, and what we're saying here is only if the number of deletes that you're about to do is less than 2. 2 is a very low number, but for purposes of demonstration, it's quite a good number. If the number of deletes you're about to send out to Active Directory is less than 2, go right ahead. Otherwise, don't. Now, we have to decide what to do if you don't. At the moment, I'm just pausing the schedule. But we could send an email. We could even try to take some kind of remedial action if we could think of something clever enough. I'm just making the point that you can put all kinds of interesting conditions and things in here to make this a better way of scheduling. And I can just run that schedule manually right here from the dashboard. I can choose that regular cycle and I can run it. I won't do it just yet because I'm just going to show you one more thing in the time that I have available. So we can see the changes that have happened, but it would be useful also to know who approved and when things got approved, and perhaps when a request was not approved, when it was denied, and who denied it. Now, this could work with any system that Identity Panel is capable of pulling information from, but the two rather obvious ones that are interesting are the MIM portal, because that's where people are requesting, typically requesting groups, or at least in my system, it's where they're requesting memberships for groups, or it could be Office 365, where the same kind of thing could be going on. Now, it's rather difficult for me to set up a demo to make this all work with Office 365 with the limited facilities that I've got here. So I haven't actually done that, but it's in principle the same. I've done it using MIM because that's just what I happen to have available. So what's the idea here? I can go to a group in the MIM portal, and I'm an administrator at the moment, but that doesn't really make any difference. I could be a user making a request. Anyway, I'm going to make a request for somebody to join, and it is going to be Adrian. There might be more than one Adrian, so we will have to choose which one. So actually, we'll choose Adrian Lanning. Okay, so I'm saying I'd like to add this to this confidential group. But as it happens, this has been configured, so it has to be approved by the owner, Amy Rusko. So when I click OK and submit, even though I'm an admin, it says, I hope, that is pending approval. So I didn't have to be an admin. It could have been the person themselves requesting access or whatever. So I'm just going to bring in another virtual machine. I hope I've got over here. And in this virtual machine, I'm logged in as Amy. I'm going to just refresh the screen, which is the screen on which she approves any requests. And I'm going to, I could go into the details of it, but of course I know perfectly well what it is. So I'm just going to click that and I'm going to approve it. But of course, in reality, I could go in, check who it is, decide if I want to approve it, and so on. Okay, so that approval's hopefully taken place. Now, the only way that Identity Panel can get to know about that is because, sorry, wrong window. Where is that window living? Hang on, come on. I think I've got rid of it. Yes, okay. So I think I've got the right, I think I'm in the right window. Okay, so the only way it's going to know is if it goes and scans it. So now it's running through these steps. It runs through them very quickly because there's not much going on. And you may even be able, if I can get this to respond, you may even be able to see it rushing through. It's already finished. So if I wanted to, I could go and check in the history and see that this has just happened. This all happened at 7:31 and 22 seconds, which is correct. Just want to check that it really did do it because the interface didn't update that quickly. And it's gone through all of these steps, all of them. And amongst them is a portal scan. And it has pulled in some data. You can see that it's pulled in some data. And it's done all these other scans as well. Now, I could go and start picking through the data, looking at the requests and everything that's been brought in. But something else I want to show you is that it's got quite a powerful reporting system. So I'm going to choose group approvals. I'm going to choose approvals that have happened in the last 7 days. So these will be just the ones that I've been messing around with. I'm going to build the report. And here is this one that was just done at 1929. And so you'll see it was approved. And it was approved by Amy. And so just showing you another way in which we can look at this data and which we can get the kind of data out that we need. So you can see some were rejected, some were approved. And if I were to change the time here, I could see, I could go back as far in time as I want to. If I put 365 there and rebuild, we're going to get quite a lot being returned. And so we've got all of these going back for a year, which of course in my system isn't a lot of data because it's not a real system. So we are able to, we could have done this just as easily for Office 365, but the fact is that, as I say, it was easier for me to configure it here in MIM because it's what I know and love and what works. Okay, so let's look at a couple of other things. Let's just quickly, on the time that I've got available, a couple of more things I want to show you. So one is, if I show you how health checks are set up, amongst the providers here is one called MIM Health Checks. And if I expand that, and show you the particular one we were looking at. So this is the one that's actually on, I'll just remind you what it looks like. I'll go to the dashboard. Here are all the health checks on the left. And they're all configured here. And if I wanted another one, I could select from this list here of available health probes. And you'll see there are loads of them available. Is a service running? Is it possible to get access to a web interface? We could be searching through history. We could be looking at file sizes and timestamps and things like that. All of these can be turned into health check information that we can put on the dashboard. And once you've got health checks, one of the things you can do with them is just look at them on the dashboard, as we've seen. But if I also show you what a workflow looks like, so here we've got a workflow called health check failed. So fairly obviously, if a health check failed, you might want to do something about it. What I've done in this really simple case, a straightforward out of the box thing, is to send a notification to me at this email address. and I can put whatever body HTML in I want, including all the details of the health check. And again, no time to go into that, but it's all there. And so I would get an email saying that there's a problem. At least I would get an email if I'd actually enabled it. I haven't enabled it because otherwise I'd be constantly getting emails from this system telling me that there's a problem, that there are problems because I've deliberately left the problems in. What else could you do with a workflow? Well, again, if we click the drop down here and look at the sorts of things that you could do, you could run a report, download a report, send it. You could run a schedule. You could do a service task. Let's choose that one just as a matter of interest. So if I choose that and look at what you could do, you can choose any service and you could try to start it, restart it, for example. So you might, if you found that a service wasn't running, you might try and remediate it in that way. What else could you do? You could run a program, you could run a script. Basically, you can trigger one of these workflows off any change to any object at all. So if any attribute changes, you could use that as a trigger for a workflow. So there's a huge amount of capability here, most of which is probably quite overwhelming at first look. So I will now wrap up by just reminding you some of the things that I've talked about. So we can detect anomalies. We can detect anomalies either in the data, identity data itself, or health checks, or even configuration data. So we can detect that a configuration has changed to MIM, or perhaps that a configuration has changed in some other system. We can either send an alert, which is very normal, or attempt to remediate. We've got this powerful audit and operational reporting. So all sorts of reporting on the status of various things, but also on audit type of information. And of course, what you've seen is visibility of identity and access data across lots of silos. You can track changes to particularly users and groups, but other things as well over time. And you saw the ability to go and choose a time and see the state of an object at that moment. And something I didn't draw too much attention to is there are lots and lots of attributes which are really references to other objects. Those are hyperlinks. And so we can simply use them to jump from object to object and track through interesting changes and so on. We can streamline audit and compliance processes by using reports or just using it in a straightforward query manner. And for MIM in particular, where that's in use, and it usually is, we can automate management of that and to some extent reduce operational overhead by alerting of issues that are causing a problem. We can generate reports on a regular basis, have them sent to people. We can raise alerts on operational status and so on. Gives us a way of tracking and troubleshooting synchronization. So if something goes wrong, we can actually look at an attribute and say, that didn't get synchronized beyond that point. Let's now look at why that is. And of course, as we've said a number of times, maintain a complete and continuous history of identity and operational data for as long as you want to keep it, and align that with whatever requirements there are for you keeping data, and you can have that aligned across systems. So that more or less brings me to the end. I am just going to launch a poll. I just want to give you the opportunity to let us know if you would like more details, if you, for example, are interested in being contacted for a more specific session where we can look at your particular needs, the things that you're connecting to, the kinds of health checks, workflows, audit requirements or whatever that you have, and to see how Identity Panel could be used specifically for you. So let us know through that poll. I can see that some of you voted and some of you haven't, but give it a little bit more time to do that. Of course, in any case, if you find that you do want to get in contact with us, all the usual stuff. Here's our web address, and always email us at info@oxfordcomputergroup.com. You can also get me, Hugh Simpson-Wells. I'm hugh.simpson-wells @oxfordcomputergroup.com. And I think that's just about it. I've just about come to the end of my allotted time. If there are any questions, I'll try and deal with them up until the end of the 45 minutes. But other than that, thanks for listening. And I do see that there are a few questions, so I will try and deal with those. Some of these, so let me see if I can organize this window so that I can actually do this. I'll just, Andreas is asking, sorry, can't organize the window so that I can actually read the questions. Let's try this. Right. Can Identity Panel run on Prem? Basically, Identity Panel does run on Prem. I am running Identity Panel on my MIM box. So I only have one virtual machine, which is representative of an on-premises server. It's running the MIM sync engine and portal and its domain controller, and it's running Identity Panel. That's not a recommended way to do it, but I'm just making the point that the footprint is pretty small, and it basically does run on premises. I think a more interesting question is, can it run in the cloud? And the answer is that there is a SaaS option, but that's something which I think if somebody's interested in, contact me and we'll go into that separately. How are credentials stored in Identity Panel? Short and quick answer to that is securely. It's only, remember, storing the credentials that are needed to operate it. It's not storing any passwords of users whose identities we're monitoring. Again, if you want a fuller answer to that, I can take that offline by email or whatever. Can you set up a connector to the FIM MIM portal? Absolutely. So you can set up a connector to the sync engine and separately to the FIM MIM portal, and then link the two pieces of data together. And in fact, although I didn't draw attention to it, that's what I'd done in that environment. Why would you do that? Because the sync engine is giving you all sorts of information, but there's additional data in the portal, and I showed you the approval data in particular being pulled from that. Is it possible to configure Identity Panel for different types of users, between admins, auditors, regular users, etc.? Absolutely, and I didn't have time to show you that you can configure the look and feel of it as well as the security on a role-by-role basis. So you can set up roles called admin, auditor, regular user. Each of them can have different dashboards. Each of them can have a different time traveler configuration to look at different silos, different attributes or whatever. Each of them can be given security right down to the attribute level, so that will apply to reporting and everything. What are the permissions Identity Panel needs to run service application on a server? I don't think I can give a quick answer to that. The configuration and setup is non-trivial. I'd be very happy to take that offline. And in fact, I might not even be the best person to handle that question in detail. How is it licensed? There are, I believe, two ways in which it can be licensed. One is a straightforward sort of perpetual license. You pay once and then you perhaps pay for software assurance each year. And the other, I believe, is that you can pay on a month-by-month basis as though it were a sort of SaaS deal. I can again take that if somebody wants a more detailed question there, I can take that offline. In the simplest configuration, it's one. It can be just one server. Even if it's multiple servers, the licensing stays the same until you move to high availability when additional licenses are required. But probably that's a more complicated answer to that, to be taken offline. I started on time. I'd like to finish on time, so I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening. If we can help you, get in touch, and see you next time.